Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest today. She is a resource that you're going to want to know. This is Tina Hollenbeck. She is a longtime homeschooling mama of two girls that are now adults, a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old Irish twins, and she has a wonderful little grandson. Um, she's homeschooled since birth, is what she says. She hails from Wisconsin. She runs the homeschool resource center, the homeschool loft is what it's called in her community, and which provides a valuable resource to all the people in Wisconsin. And then she also runs the homeschool loftcast, a podcast to help other homeschooling families to be successful. But the coolest thing that she's done is created the Homeschool Roadmap to guide parents to find curriculums and things that would best suit their family. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but I just want to welcome you on, Tina, and thank you so much for coming. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you for having me. It is my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Likewise, likewise. So let's just jump in. Tell your story. Like, when did you start? When did you decide to homeschool? When did you know it's what you wanted to do? And then let's hear about your journey with your girls.
Well, kind of a long journey in a sense. So, my husband and I got married when I was really young, but we waited several years to have children. And
Mhm.
in the interim, I became a public school teacher. So, I was a public school teacher for 9 years. I taught at the middle school level for 5 years and a high school level for 4 years. But we always knew that when we decided to have children, that I would quit my job. It was not even a second thought, and I would raise our children and go from there. But way back when we were newlyweds, I had also met one of the modern pioneer homeschool families in my community.
Hmm.
In Wisconsin, homeschooling became legal in 1984. And
Wow.
this family, this was probably the early 90s or something, they started homeschooling right from that get go. And
Wow.
I just thought they were the neatest family. So I kind of tucked that in the back of my mind and went forward with life. And then we had our first daughter, Rachel. And 11 and a half months later, we had our second daughter, Abigail, and people thought that was nuts. And I always like to say that I wanted twins, but I'm sure God was like, you can't do twins, but maybe you can
Yeah.
handle this, right? So, but I'm
Love it.
so glad that I had them together because they really are each other's best friends. So that was really good. And immediately, so I quit my job, we're doing the thing, and I had that homeschooling thing back in my mind.
Mhm.
My husband wasn't so sure. And, spouses who are not supportive or not sure have different reasons. For my husband, it was that he's the firstborn in his family and he's a good boy, and he did not want to disappoint his parents, who were public school teachers. So he thought, oh, if we do homeschooling, that's going to hurt their feelings, and I can't do that. And so, okay, fine. Well, at the same time that that was going on, he was the intern youth pastor at the church we were attending at the time. And so he got to know all the teenagers in the church, like 12 and up. And
Wow.
he came home one day. So I had my little toddler, Rachel, and my little baby, Abby. And he came home after youth group and he said, okay, I've been there for a few months. I've gotten to know all the kids and I like most of them. But there's something about those homeschool kids. He said they're interested, not just in what I'm teaching, they're interested in learning about
Mhm.
everything. They can talk to me. They can talk to the other adults. They can talk to any other kid in the room. It doesn't matter what school they go to or whatever. And they're just cool kids. And he said, if that's what homeschooling does, then I'm all in. And I said, okay, can I get that in writing? Because you said it, I'm holding you to it.
I
And I
love
said,
it.
well, what about your parents? And he said, well, we'll deal with that. And I'll tell you, my in-laws are the best example of parents who let their kids parent their own children
Hmm.
as they want to. And there's no judgment. Now, they didn't always understand, but they just
Yeah.
asked fair minded questions, right? They
Hmm.
weren't these negative Nellies and, this is not how we do things or whatever. And I'm so thankful for them. And I knew they'd be fine. But my
Yeah.
husband just kind of had to come to that on his own. But
Yeah.
seriously, once
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
did, I'm like, now we're a homeschool family, and I joined the local homeschool group. And again, I had like a 1 and a 2-year-old or whatever, but I was in. So
I love it. So then, as you're homeschooling, so this
mhm.
is, you know, years ago when
Yep.
homeschooling wasn't popular yet, like it is now. and the commonplace. What
Mhm.
was that like during that time? Did you have a lot of curriculums? Did you
Mhm.
have very many choices, or was that something that you had to discover and figure out along the way?
So by the time that I got into it, so again, we're talking 2001 and 2002 is when my girls were born. So by
Mhm.
the time we actually legally had to start doing the homeschooling in Wisconsin, compulsory attendance starts at age 6.
Mhm.
So that's when I had to officially do some things. Um, so by the time I started, we were almost 20 years into the homeschool movement in Wisconsin and really across the United States in the modern era. So
Mhm.
I was the recipient of a lot of hard work that people in the 80s and the 90s did, not just
Yeah.
in Wisconsin, but everywhere to get it legalized, to get it normalized, to get curriculum providers to recognize that we exist and that we're legitimate.
Mhm.
Um, I have these pioneer friends of mine tell me stories about how when they started in the probably mid 80s, there were only two curriculum providers that would even sell to them. So they had like
Wow.
no choices. They'd have to make up their own stuff because they basically had nothing, right? By the time I came along, really, I was the recipient of all their hard work. So it wasn't very difficult for me.
Mhm.
And there really were a lot of choices. The internet was there. I'm not that much of a dinosaur. But it wasn't the same level of find stuff as quickly. And most of us went to homeschool conventions and saw things in person and talked to people in our homeschool groups. It wasn't like we searched the net like people just do as a matter of course today. So,
So what did you end up like? What philosophy did you gravitate towards? What curriculums did you gravitate towards?
mhm.
What did that look like for you and for your girls?
So the homeschool group I joined, it's a very sweet group. They're still going strong. They've been around for 30 years or so, and they do
Wow.
phenomenal things in our community. When I joined, most of the people I met right away were doing classical education.
Mhm.
So, not knowing anything, I got this big fat book. It's called The Well Trained Mind. It's about 800 pages long, because this is like the Bible of classical education. And I started
Mhm.
reading it, and I'm like, okay, I get this, but it wasn't hitting me right. Like, this isn't me.
Yeah.
This isn't my kids. But everybody I knew was doing it. They weren't telling me I had to be a classical educator. I just felt that internal pressure. It was nobody else
Sure.
telling me,
Sure.
right? And I felt like if I didn't do that, I would fail my kids. But at the same time, I was really not feeling it. So I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do, you know? And again, at this point, they're like preschoolers, maybe getting to be 4, 5, 5, 6. But that same group brought in a lady named Carol Joy Seid, Seid. That's how you spell her last name. She still does seminars, some in person, a lot virtual now. And she is more of a Charlotte Mason homeschooler.
Mhm.
And they brought her in because they didn't have any bias toward one method or another. It's just that the ones I met happened to be classical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I went to Carol Joy's seminar, and that was my sweet spot. She talks about using real books, living books, literature to educate your kids. And she also talks about nature study. I'm not so much nature study, but I could understand the value of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I was like so thankful that I could hear about other methods and I could
Mhm.
be like, there's not just one right way to do it. So what I determined over the scope of time was I kind of am a Charlotte Mason style homeschooler, but I say that kind of with small letters because I think really the best thing that we can do for our kids is be the type of homeschooler that matches how our kids are wired. There's not a kid
Yes.
on the planet that is wired to be a Charlotte Mason kid.
Yeah.
They might have ideas that, that really resonate. If they love to be outside, nature study is going to hit them, right? There's not a
Mhm.
kid on the planet that's hardwired to be a classical homeschooler. They're not, right? There's little bits and pieces in their minds, in their hearts that probably resonate with even using a workbook or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is that we fit how our kids are designed. So
I
I
love
became an
that.
eclectic homeschooler long term. I never wanted to be one that stuck with just one method because I didn't think that that was appropriate.
I love that. And for those of you listening, the term eclectic homeschooler means somebody who pulls from various philosophies, curriculums, ideologies. That's why we're eclectic unschoolers. We're
Hmm.
not, in our family, we're not purists by any
Right.
stretch because I do use a math curriculum, and there's certain things that I do use with my kids, and
Right.
and it works well. But and it's interesting because most people I meet are not purists in one specific
Right.
philosophy.
Right.
They hop around and pull what's best for the kids, which
Right.
is what makes it what matters.
Yeah.
That
And I think that's what we need to do, and let those of you who are new or thinking about it know that that's okay. Right. I think
Mhm.
if you stick hardcore into being a purist, you're probably going to hurt your kids. There's a lady I knew probably about 10, 15 years ago. Um, and she told me that before their first child was born, her husband decided what curriculum they would use, and it happened to be a traditional school style one. That doesn't bother me if that's what would fit the child, right? But this
Right.
man, before any of their children were born, he decided what curriculum they would use. They started buying full sets at each grade level
Mm.
before any of the kids were born, and they made all of their kids ramrod through that curriculum all the way through.
Oh.
And my heart broke. And she was on board with it. She thought that was great. I'm like, okay, how do your kids feel? That's what I really wanted to know, but I didn't know them. So,
They probably felt a lot like public school kids do. They're like, this is what you're going to do. Okay. So then you're raising the girls. At what point, like timeline wise, did you start the resource center and then the roadmap? And then I want to get into the roadmap here in a bit, but
yeah, the roadmap came first.
okay.
So
Talk
that was
about that.
about that. That was 2013. So it's called the Homeschool Resource Roadmap now, and actually we're talking about almost 11 years ago. It was March
Wow.
2013 that I'm just minding my own business, being an eclectic homeschooler, thinking about we're on the cusp of high school, blah blah blah, and I get an email blast from a curriculum company which shall remain nameless. I will not dox them. Um, I had used the curriculum, and
Mhm.
like 3 4 months prior, I had determined it was no longer a good fit for us. It happened to be a math curriculum, and so I had set it aside, and I was in the process of trying to find a new curriculum, but I was still on their mailing list.
Mhm.
So I got this email blast saying, "We are proudly aligning our new edition with the Common Core standards, and we are so happy about this." And I just about lost my lunch.
You're like,
um,
no.
Now, maybe a lot of your listeners don't know what that is. They don't know why that made me just about want to die, because it's actually been around in public schools since 2010, and it made
Mhm.
its foray into homeschooling in 2013. So a lot of people just kind of don't think twice about it. But it was like seismic in 2013 to have that happen. I knew what it was because I'm a former public school teacher. I am an
Mhm.
informed taxpayer. I had kind of stayed in that loop, and I didn't like it personally. And I was really upset that my tax dollars were going to pay for it in the public schools.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, I'm a homeschooler. And then I got this blast. And the very same week, I got a word from a friend who used a different curriculum that said they were going to start to refer to the Common Core as they made revisions. Like they were going to be more gentle about it, but it was going to be something in play. And this is a major curriculum provider that people use. So there was an upheaval in the homeschool groups that I was in.
Mhm.
What do we do with this? What does that mean? A lot of people didn't know what it meant. And when we kind of explained it, they were like, well, I don't like that. Every single provider is going to go Common Core. What are we going to do? And then people started making guesses. Oh, if that one's Common Core, then this one is too. And it was a mess. It was a hot mess. And I made famous last words. I made the mistake of saying, well, I don't like any of this drama. We cannot assume. Somebody has to contact the providers and ask them what they're doing with Common Core. Hmm. Yep.
And
When you
that
say
person
that, it
ended
became
up
me.
being became you.
Mm-hmm. Next thing I know, I'm drafting an email and I start sending it to people. And here was also my naivete. And also it shows how much things have grown over the years. So here we are, 2013. I knew there were a lot of curriculum providers out there that I hadn't personally used, but I'd heard about them over the years. And I thought, I'm going to have to send a lot of emails. So I thought there would be like 300 curriculum providers. But I thought, that's a lot, but I can do it. I'll just
Yeah.
tackle it little by little. The girls are kind of independent in what they do. Well, 11 years later, you guess how many curriculum providers are on the roadmap?
Oh heavens. I got a book once and there was so many. I'm guessing probably hundreds.
As of today,
Oh my gosh.
6,223.
I did not realize there were that many curriculum providers.
Now, to be fair, Some of these, because I've learned about unschooling, I kind of became an unschooler as my girls got into high school in the sense of giving them more choice, more and more choice in their
Mhm.
learning. And being in different homeschool groups, I realized there's some really valuable YouTube channels out there that are
Mm.
educational, valuable. Homeschoolers use them. They're listed, right?
Oh,
I
so cool.
realized, here's this mom and pop curriculum provider that sells a penmanship book and that's all they have. But they're
Mhm.
on there, right? And then
Yeah.
the big wigs are on there too, right? So I am in a whole bunch of homeschool groups even to this day. And every time that somebody mentions a new provider of whatever sort, I send them a letter and I get them added because there's so many different styles out there that every kid has different needs. And so who am I to say that this YouTube channel isn't valuable if 10
Mhm.
homeschoolers just told me that they use it?
Yeah.
So
If it's
I add
if
them
it's
all.
valuable to somebody, then
Yeah.
it's valuable.
And I look at the websites, I look at the channel, I'm like, that is educational. We're going to add it.
So how does the roadmap work? Do you want to describe that for just a second?
Absolutely. So, one thing I want to tell you is that the roadmap is completely free to use. Homeschoolers don't have to pay anything to use
I
it.
love that.
I don't do ads, I don't do affiliate links because um, I don't want there to be any bias.
Mhm.
I have my own preferences, I have my own ideas. Anybody who knows me and reads anything about me outside of the roadmap will know that I don't like Common Core. But
I also am right there with you.
right? But I didn't want the roadmap to reflect that because I wanted it to be an objective place where anybody could find information. I also knew that if I started telling curriculum providers, by the way, if you are Common Core, we're going to blacklist you, well, they're not going to give me honest answers, right?
Right, right.
And my whole goal was to get everybody to tell me, all the providers to tell me what they felt with Common Core
Mhm.
honestly, and let parents make the decision
I
about what
love
they
that.
wanted to use for their kids. It's not for me to say, if somebody asks me, what do you think? I will tell them. But it's not for me to
Mhm.
say if somebody wants to use something that's aligned with Common Core. So,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
and I was going to say, I apologize for interrupting, but I think that's good because I have friends that whose kids are in public school and are passionate about Common Core and they
Mm,
love it. But I love that you give the information
right.
and then it allows people to choose for
Yeah,
themselves, which is
right.
fabulous.
And
Anyway, keep going, keep going.
and I knew that I was doing on the right track when I would start to get emails out of the blue from providers that maybe they're on Teachers Pay Teachers or something like that. They're aligned with Common Core. They believe in Common Core, and they email me cold calling saying, "Could you add me to your website?" Okay, so you don't know my position, and you shouldn't know my position, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
what I wanted to do. So it started out with these long lists of categorizing publishers by Common Core
Mhm.
position, but not judgmental, just saying, here's the facts. But after a couple of years, people were like, well, this is great. Now we have 1,000 providers listed here, but I'm looking for elementary math and I can't tell hide nor hair which ones actually have math. So then I added another component to the roadmap. So if you go on the roadmap right now, you'll see some tabs at the top, and one says Common Core Project. And if you just want to look up a publisher that you want to use and you want to know what its position is on Common Core, you can go there, you can look it up alphabetically, and you'll find it. A lot of people, that's not their starting point. And even back in 2013, it wasn't necessarily the starting point. So what I started doing in 2015 was going back to the websites
Hmm.
and looking and finding out what subjects do you cover? What ages are you for? What worldview? Are you a Christian provider? Are you secular? Are you Muslim? Are you Jewish? There's a few of all those out there. Um, do you have print based materials? Are you online? Do you have downloads? Is some of your stuff free? And so what I did with all that information was make the main part of the site. It's called the Deluxe Charts Project, and there's a tab for that right in the middle of the site. And if you would like to look up elementary math, you click there, you scroll to where it says elementary math, and you open up a PDF chart. It will tell you all the options for elementary math. And then there are columns. It'll tell you Common Core position. Is this Christian? Is this secular? What ages is it for? And based on all those parameters, you can narrow it down to the ones that are going to fit you. And then you could go look at their websites too after that.
That is so cool. What's been the response since you started the resource roadmap?
From homeschoolers or?
Yeah, from homeschooling families.
Well, generally very positive,
Mm-hmm.
because one thing, and I guess some of your listeners will probably feel this frustration, or maybe they won't realize that they've been struggling until they hear what I'm going to say. But um, if you're looking up elementary math for homeschoolers and you Google that or DuckDuckGo it or whatever you want to do with your browser, um, you're not going to get all the options. You're not. You're going to get
No,
like
that's true.
10 that have ad revenue that they can pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a couple others for whatever reason. Um, so it would take you hours and hours and hours, and you would still only have a couple dozen options. And then maybe you go look in a homeschool group and you ask, what does everybody use for elementary math? Well, you're going to get a couple of options, but what if those 10 or 12, whatever options you get, you look at them and none of them matches your kids? You're going to think you can't homeschool, right? So
Right.
what I love and what I've been getting feedback from the roadmap about is, as overwhelming as some of the lists are, because there's probably like 967 elementary math curricula, and I'm not
Oh my
exaggerating.
gosh.
As overwhelming as that is, at least parents can know when they look at it, that's everything, right? Because
Yeah,
I'm
that there's nothing else.
I'm continually updating this, and so when a new one comes out, and I can't believe people are still writing more curriculum because there's so much. But if something new comes out, I add it as soon as I find out about it, so they can go there and they can say, yes, this is a lot. But I know that I have a 7-year-old, and I know I don't like Common Core, and I want non-sectarian curriculum, and I want a print book. I don't want online. Well, you use
Mhm.
those parameters and you can narrow it down to something of a manageable amount, and then you can dig into their websites a little bit more.
I love that. Well, I feel like that gives being able to limit the parameters
Mm-hmm.
really simplifies things for a lot of families because I know for a lot of families the starting point is like, what curriculums do I get? Right.
Right.
As opposed to like, you need to de-school for a while, friends,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
like, but but I feel like in a lot of cases, the curriculums are almost like training wheels. Like they need, I
Yeah.
needed something, and so to have that roadmap to narrow down the perimeters is such a great, beautiful thing. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you for
Mm-hmm.
taking all that time, all of the years that it
Well,
took to do
and,
that
and that's
and
really funny.
continue.
Yeah, because it wasn't something I planned to do. It's not like I went and wrote a business model and said, because I don't make any money, but I didn't do that. I started, and then I don't know if I'm part of it. I feel like I'm paying it forward. All those
Mhm.
pioneer people that made it easy for me. So I feel like I'm just paying it forward. And I probably am a little OCD. So, I mean, God uses everything for good. So he can use that too. So I just feel like as long as I'm able, I want to make it useful for homeschoolers, and because I have gotten so much good feedback from it, and people feeling relieved. They,
Yeah.
they look overwhelmed when they see the list at first, but then they realize, okay, this is going to be helpful in the end. So,
I love that. And I want to, for those of you listening, I'll have the link in the show notes so that you can go to the roadmap, download
mhm.
it, and then utilize it. Or I guess you don't really download it. It's like it's a website.
It's a website, but the charts are PDFs.
So families, we've got the roadmap in the link below in the show notes so that y'all can click on that. And again, it's free, which bless you, Tina, for doing that. Um, let's talk a little bit about the Resource Center.
Mhm.
How did you start the Resource Center and what does that look like in
Mhm.
Wisconsin?
So that kind of grew, I guess, from the roadmap. I mentioned that I was just your average homeschool mom before then. I still am just an average
Mhm.
homeschool mom, but I was just minding my own business. And then the roadmap started. From there, because I was looking at the curriculum websites and I was telling people, yes, this has math, this has science, that kind of thing, I kind of online and locally started to become known as like the curriculum guru. Everyone's like,
Mhm.
Tina knows all about this. And I'm also very passionate about making sure that we know our state homeschool law wherever you live,
Mhm.
because we're not beholden to public school regulations for sure. But whatever style we use, unschooling included, right? We
Mhm.
have to obey our homeschool law, whether we like it or
Right.
not, right? We can lobby to
Right.
get it
Right.
changed if we don't like it. But so I became very passionate about making sure that I knew the Wisconsin homeschool law and I could explain it to other people. Um, And so, from having started the roadmap and people getting to know that about me, they started to ask, "Hey, can I get together with coffee? For you with coffee over coffee, so you can tell me about homeschooling? I'm wanting to start." And that was probably 2014, 2015, and I would just do that whenever somebody would ask. Well, then in spring of 2021, a local friend of mine whose kids were about the same age as my kids, and so her son had graduated, her daughter was about ready to graduate, and she felt like she wanted to do something more with her time.
Mhm.
And she and her husband had been renting a little space near an old movie theater, old vintage movie theater. He's a real estate appraiser, and they'd been renting the space. And she said, "Well, he said we can have the space. Let's open something for homeschoolers." Now, this was in the middle of COVID because it was spring of 2021, but that's not why we started it. We thought, well, okay, this is serendipity and we'll just start it. So we initially opened up our space in that little space, and we would do one on one appointments with anybody who wanted to come talk to us in our community, in the county, in the area. We created a website. Her son is a podcast producer, so he said, you guys have to make a podcast. So we started doing a podcast. I'd never listened
I
to
love
one
it.
before, but here we are. And
I
we just
love it.
started trying to answer questions for local homeschoolers. And
Mhm.
about a year ago, so we did that together for 2 years. About a year ago, she felt led to step away and do something else, kind of a Charlotte Mason co op type situation. So she's off
Nice.
doing that, working with children, and especially in that Charlotte Mason vein. And she bequeathed the homeschool loft to me. Because that's really my wheelhouse, is doing the parent
Yeah.
thing, the parent consultation. So the main thing is I meet with parents. When she stepped aside, we gave up that physical space. So now I meet with parents at our local library, and I love the rent. $0. That's all the better, right?
Which is great.
Right. They have study rooms in my local library. I can reserve them a couple months ahead of time. So I just kind of make my slots, and I have a website with a scheduling app, and they want to come meet me. They schedule it, and they come talk with me. I do seminars. I'll get together in different parts of the area. And one of my favorite subjects is how to homeschool in high school, because I feel like
Yay.
next to learning how to read, that's the next stress point for homeschoolers, is how do I do this high
Mhm.
school thing? Um, and I just try to be a resource for the people around here, whatever questions they have. Another thing that I do is I let homeschoolers know what's available in the community for them. So I've got a big
Wow.
community calendar that says all these different things that are happening around here. And it's kind of amazing that there's a lot going on. So,
That is super cool. Which is a perfect segue into, let's talk about homeschooling and high schooling, and then what's next, and can they get into college, and what does that look like, because you've been through that, you know.
yeah. And not only do I know from my kids' experience, because how old are your kids?
So I have a 25, a 22, a 16, almost 17,
Okay.
a 15, almost 16, 11, and 8.
Okay.
So
So
we've
you have
got a
adult
span.
kids. You know
Yes.
that every person is wired differently, and not everybody's
Hmm.
going to follow the same life path. And also, homeschoolers tend to be independent thinkers, for better, for
Yes,
worse,
they
right?
do. Yeah,
So they
yes,
don't
they
all
do.
follow the same
Absolutely.
path, and that's a good thing. But I know not only from my kids, but from in my local homeschool group, all my friends' kids that were older than my kids, following along with them and becoming friends with them and seeing what their kids were doing and seeing what some of the kids have done in the last couple of years as well. So I know a whole lot of high school homeschool graduates. And I can tell you that whatever life path that you want to pursue as a homeschool graduate, you can do it. I mean, honestly, the sky is the limit. I don't know these people personally, but there's even a story of a radical unschooling family where one of the young men, the sons, wanted to get to Harvard, and he did.
Hmm.
He took the
Wow.
SAT. He didn't have a transcript. He had none of the things that that they say you have to have, and that I encourage people to make. But he had none of it. Right? He simply
Hmm.
took the SAT, basically aced it, applied to Harvard, and was given a full ride scholarship as a radical unschooler. So
That is so cool.
there are no limits. Whatever somebody wants to do, if they just figure out, I'm here, what does it take to get there? And then you make the steps and you work it backwards, you can do it.
I love it. So, what did homeschooling look like for your girls in high school? Because you said you moved more towards a little bit of unschooling,
Mhm.
as well as you're doing very eclectic. What
Yeah.
did that look like day
Um,
to day?
Day to day. Yeah. So I moved more toward unschooling in the sense that I would say Our homeschool law says we have to do something for science every year, not necessarily one credit every year, but my girls didn't like science or math. So I use the homeschool law as the bad guy. I'm like, yeah, the law says I have to
Yeah.
do something, right? So here are some options. It doesn't have to be just these options, but what do you like here? And they'd pick something, and if they didn't like any of those, I'd come out with some more options because they didn't know the curricular options like I did, right? So I would just kind of
Right, right.
put forth things I was comfortable with, whatever they chose, right? And so I let them pick. When they were
Mhm.
younger, I would pick, and it would be more that Charlotte Mason thing. But as they got older, I thought they're young adults. They know what they like, what they don't like. I need to teach them how to start making decisions now so that they can do that when they're adults and they're
Mhm.
not under my wing anymore. And so that's kind of why I did that. Still within the parameters of what our homeschool law said, still within our family values. My husband really believes strongly in history. So he
Mhm.
said these girls will have history every year of high school, whether they like it or not, and they
Yeah.
like history too. But it was not it was whatever we used was fine, but it had to be something, right? So, what did things look like day to day? We made a pact, my daughters and I. I said, if you commit to doing your book work for 4 hours a day, 9 to 1, we decided together. I have a daughter who is not a morning person, and I said, you could do it any time of day. And she decided she'd rather force herself to get up, get the stuff done so she could go on with the rest of her day in the afternoon and the evening. And that was her choice, right?
Mhm.
So we decided 9 to 1. And if you work diligently during that time period, and I made them a learning log and we set goals together, whatever you get done in that time period is what you were supposed to get done that day. And if it's a lot because the math lesson was easy and you love that history thing and you go on, that's great. If it was one thing because you chose to work on this essay and it took you 4 hours, I don't care. You are making progress. And whatever you did after 4 hours, we're calling it good for the day. And then you're going to go on and do all your other things. I'm still going to put on your transcript, but they're not part of the formal book work, right? So you're going to
Right,
cook
right.
and you're going to do all these other things, and they're still going on your transcript, but it's not the formal part of the day.
I love that. So, what would you say, because you said something earlier and I hear this a lot from moms. There's this feeling like I bought this curriculum, we have to finish it or else. Even though it's not working,
Yeah,
even though the mom hates it or the child hates it, what would you say to them?
get rid of it. Absolutely get rid of it. If it's not working, why would we drag our kids and ourselves through it? Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean you should change every week. Or if your kid's having a bad week or a bad day, we'll just set it aside for the week and come back to it and see. But if you try it a few times and it's consistently not working, that is not a good fit for your child or for you. And why we have freedom as homeschoolers and we have 6,223 options. So why would we bang our heads against the wall
Mhm.
with that one particular curriculum that maybe our best friend loves? It's okay if you don't love it and if your kid doesn't
Yeah,
love it.
I love that. Well, and I think that's so one thing I see amongst a lot of parents too, especially just coming out of the school system,
Mm-hmm.
is there's almost a paralyzation. Like I'm not used to this freedom, and I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it. And so I hear that with parents, like,
Yep.
what do I do? And oh my gosh, I have to stick to this curriculum or else. And letting go of that those ideas is hard. I mean, it takes time to take the shackles off our brains that, oh my gosh, no, freedom looks like freedom.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you have 6,000 options, not just, well, this is what you're doing at school at the end.
Right. Right.
What advice would you give, especially new homeschoolers?
Mm-hmm.
You've done this, you've raised girls, which now what are your girls doing today? Like what does their day look like? And then let's talk about what advice you'd give.
Okay. So my older, she had a very specific plan that she had in her mind since she was 14 years old, because she is the firstborn, and she just had this all laid out. And she was very sure that she was called to be a missionary to Japan. And so
Oh,
she
wow.
researched and she found this. She neither of my girls wanted to go right to 4-year college, which is
Mhm.
interesting because when I was growing up, I was the schoolgirl, and I had to unindoctrinate myself from all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that they chose that route, but so she researched it, and she found this very particular 2-year Bible college, missions oriented college, 2 hours from our house. So she was going to live on campus, but really cool, right? She did what she needed to do. She loved that there was no math requirement because she hates math. So that was phenomenal. And she applied and she got in and she was going to do it. And then COVID. Because one thing I should tell you that is really cool is that even though my girls are essentially a year apart, my older, when she was in middle school, came to me one day and she said, "Mom, can I just wait to graduate until Abby graduates? Because we're best friends and I want to just graduate with her." So my older, she's got such a soft sweetheart. She basically redshirted herself and waited.
Wow.
Which was very cool. And I said, if you don't mind, being almost 19 when you graduate, that's fine with me. And we can always change paths in the middle if you change your mind. But she didn't. So here she is. She's got accepted. Everything's on track. And then COVID hits. And for the longest time, so she got accepted like in January, February, and then COVID hit in March. For the longest time, her school was not putting on restrictions or anything like that. And she's like getting nervous, but she's like, all right, I think I'm going to do this. She did all her college dorm shopping. 2 weeks before the semester was supposed to start, they instituted a whole boatload of restrictions and rules and mandates. And she couldn't do it. She said, even if it was a mask thing and she doesn't mask. And they said, we'll just get an exemption from your doctor. Now, who in August 2020 was doing that?
Right.
Nobody was, but it was 2 weeks before the semester. And she said, but even if I get it, what if I get there and I move in and everything like this, and then they add something else? And it stressed her out to no end. It tore her apart. And she said, can I just not go? And we said, absolutely. This is your education. We totally support you. So she stayed home and she really struggled for the next couple of years because she felt like she failed because she wasn't doing the plan she set. But she worked her way through it. She initially started her own little Girl Friday business where she would go and clean houses and babysit. And she's a lifeguard, so she taught swim lessons. Anybody who would hire her, being a normal person in 2020, she would do it. And she muddled her way through that. She started volunteering with our homeschool choir and musical that she'd been a part of as a kid. And then she eventually got hired part-time by a lawyer as a secretary. And then she got hired part-time as a church secretary for a year. So she did all of that. She's like, all right, this is good life experience. And then this past fall, she decided to go to school at the local community college here in our town. And her program is called Justice and Community Advocacy. And her heart is to work with troubled young girls. So this will enable her to work in halfway houses with troubled teenagers, troubled early 20s, that kind of thing. And she may add a paralegal degree to that as well, because she has really resonated with the courtroom stuff that she has seen as she's been in class. And she's acing it. She was a quasi-unschooler who stepped away from the classroom for 3 years entirely, and she's acing every single class. So that's what homeschooling does.
Well,
go ahead.
And I was going to say, I think it's interesting because as parents, we worry so much like they're not going to figure things out and they're just going to die and like they're going to get into the real world and then just life will end because they don't. But the reality is they keep learning, they keep growing, they figure things out.
Right.
They figure things out.
I didn't do paper and pencil tests at all in high school. I had them tell me things. We wrote essays. They did projects. And it turns out she's actually doing a lot of projects in her college and not so much paper and pencil tests, but every single test she's had to take, she's aced. It doesn't matter.
I love that.
She's a studier.
Yeah.
She knows how to learn. She loves learning. She realizes that not every class is going to be her favorite. She's an excellent writer, but she still had to take the Intro to Expose class because they didn't let anyone test out of it. And she was bored out of her head, but she also aced it because she just did what she had to do. So
yeah,
she's fine.
They learn really quick. Just jump through their hoops. You'll be fine.
Exactly.
So then your second daughter, what happened with your, go ahead.
My second daughter is, I mentioned free thinking. Did I say that before? My younger daughter.
You didn't, but she's a free thinker.
She thought, no, she's smart as a whip. We used to joke with her that she could be a lawyer. And she said, yeah, but Mom, I'm too smart. I'm not going to do 8 years of college. I'm not that dumb. So she said she's not going to do it. So she loves kids. She had it in her mind early in high school. She was going to attend a professional nanny school in Ohio, and then travel the world as an international nanny. And eventually she said, I don't think I'm ever going to get married. Eventually, I'll adopt my own kids, and this will be great, right? And we're like, okay, well, all right. um, it was not COVID that upended her plans. What upended her plans was love. So
Okay.
she's 16 and a half years old, and she meets the love of her life, who is now her husband. Um, now, this was,
Was your heart dying as a mom going, what?
well, it was
I mean,
pre-COVID.
obviously she didn't get married at
No, no,
16,
no,
but
no. It was pre-COVID, and she was working at the YMCA, and her now husband brought his nieces into the kids' corner where she was working, well, so he could go work out with his brother. And it's honestly one of these love at first sight things. They just kind of looked at each other, and it was just like, oh, And she tells me this afterwards, right? But I could tell. And long story short, long story short, 6 days after she turned 18, they got married in the middle of COVID. I know. And they eloped and came back and told us, we just got married.
you're like, thank you. Thanks for letting us know,
Right,
friends.
right. This is your free thinker. Now, I will also say, of course, we have met him. As soon as I met him, I literally had this feeling in my gut, this is it. I know this is her guy. And so that was very, very cool to just know that. And he's a phenomenal young man. Um, they were in love. And I think really COVID scared them. Like, is the world going to be normal? Can we just live a normal life? Maybe not. So we're just going to make it happen. And I kind of appreciate that. So the funny story about that. So the one thing I was having my girls do that last semester of their high school year, right, was I wanted them to each write a capstone research paper, because I thought you should each write a research paper once, right? Okay, fine. Rachel was doing it. Abby, I gave her the tools and whatever, and she just wasn't giving me the, oh, well, your cards, you're this, you're that, or whatever. And I kept kind of hounding her about it. She said, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Of course, she never got to it. What I find out was she was researching, how do you get your birth certificate in the middle of COVID when you can't ask your mom? How do you get a marriage license in the middle of COVID? Where do you have to go? What do you have to do? How do you get wedding rings in the all these different things? So she's researching like crazy. I know that my girl knows how to research. She just couldn't write the paper about it for obvious reasons at that time. So
I love it.
She never wrote it. But he's phenomenal, perfect. As soon as we kind of got over the initial shock, they're a wonderful couple. They're exactly who, and we did not expect to have our girls married that young, right? I think the old timey homeschoolers, there was this thing of as soon as you graduate, you get married like that. That wasn't on our mind. It was just, he's the right guy. So they are the parents of my grandson. She worked during COVID. She worked online for a national insurance company doing customer service. Her husband said, Abby, you're too smart for that. You need to do something different. Do you want to go to college? And she said, nope, not going to waste my time with that. What she did do was apply for a sales job with another national insurance company. And at 19, she became one of their youngest licensed agents ever. And she's still working for them now. And she basically tops their sales chart basically every month. That's her sweet spot. She's a saleswoman. And she's taking classes through Coursera and different things on her own in cybersecurity. So she might become a cybersecurity expert. I have no idea. But and now she's mom to this baby. So
well, and this brings up an interesting point, because you really legitimately raised lifelong learners. And they still learn, and they still love to learn, and they, and they know how to learn.
Yeah.
They don't have to have somebody else tell them what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. When she told us, she said, yeah, I'm starting to take these Coursera classes. We're like, wow, okay. I really have an interest in this. I'm like, good. That's phenomenal. So, and there are so many, I mentioned this before, there are so many pathways for our kids to find their way and have a happy, healthy, productive adult life. That's what I think are my goals for my kids, and what I really hope all parents think. It's not about, getting into four-year college if your kid doesn't want to do that, right? And it's not that the kid isn't smart enough for four-year college. It's that college is too limiting for some people. That's my take on that. So if your kid is happy, if they're healthy, if they're productive, what else can you ask for?
It's true. It's true. What advice would you give new homeschooling parents?
What age are their kids?
Well, it all varies, because I've got listeners who have elementary, and they're like, I'm pulling my, third grader or my kindergartner.
Yeah.
But I also have parents listening who are pulling their 11th grader
Yeah.
or they're pulling their 10th grader,
Yeah. Yeah.
or their middle schooler. So we get the whole spectrum.
There's so much I could say to any one of those people, of course, right? We all could do that. I guess maybe the bottom line would be trust yourself as a parent and trust your kid. And I
Yeah.
think, trust yourself as a parent because so many parents think, oh, it's the teachers, the experts, the curriculum knows what they're doing. No. The parent is the person who knows that child better than anybody else on the planet and loves that child more than anybody ever will. So, do you necessarily know all the nuts and bolts of your homeschool law the day you decide to pull them out? No, but you can learn. And you will learn because you love your kid and you're going to make sure that they have what they need, that they follow the rules and they can get what they need to do. Do you necessarily know all the curriculum, all of this? No. If your kid's really into math and you barely got through Algebra 1 and he's 12 years old and he needs calculus, can you help him directly? No. But you can find a resource that can help him and you will. So I ache whenever parents are so insecure about themselves. They can trust themselves. They can trust the knowledge that they have of their kids and use that motivation to get forward from there.
I love that. I love that. Tina, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to share with us your knowledge, your wisdom, the resource map that is just phenomenal. Mom and papas, you heard Tina. You are capable. You love and know your kids better than anyone else, and you got this. So we'll talk next week. Have a good week, friends.